All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take Sharp and Shapiro. You see, that's why we love this show, because we can go from taking calls on guns and gun legislation to a WWE wrestler who was at one point number one, and now we go to some legal talk. That's why I love doing this show.
It's the super-duper transition, Brian
That's right.
and JD. That's what you guys do.
And by the way, I will be going to Samstown. We're all going to be going, right?
Yes.
Thursday night to watch Rob Van Dam, Ken Shamrock, and all that. So we were just talking about concussions. He was just saying that how he had 500 concussions. So what better person can we have in studio right now? His name is Steve Lewis. He works with the Van Law Firm, of course, Sandy Van, who comes in with us every week. And Steve Lewis joining us, and this is what he specializes in, brain trauma, that sort of thing. So what a good transition. Steve, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me in.
So first of all, before we get to the specifics of handling, brain injury matters and that sort of thing, when you hear someone say that they've had 500 concussions, what's the first thing that enters your mind when you hear something like that?
Wow. I don't even know what the response is. I wish I had been listening to hear what you guys came up with.
But this is a really serious issue because, as you know, we NFL talk about these types of injuries and brain trauma and that sort of thing. And I know you don't just deal with, for example, an athlete, but this is a really serious issue and it's complex. And what do you make of what's going on in the world right now, specifically in professional sports, when you have all these brain traumas and concussions and injuries? What do you make of this? And I would imagine at times you've represented athletes that have suffered brain injuries, correct?
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing is how medical technology is increasing and giving us all better ability to learn and to study and to follow more and more people so that we can all understand exactly what's going on, because everybody's unique.
Now, you've been a lawyer for 21 years, right? Just give me a little bit of background on you. You've been doing this for a long time.
I've been doing it for a long time, 21 years. I've represented multiple people with brain injuries from all different types of injuries and impacts.
What is like the most difficult thing about having to, I shouldn't say deal with because they're your clients, but I would imagine it's got to be difficult to be dealing with clients that have these brain injuries, right? It's at times maybe even difficult to have a lengthy conversation with them.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that you have as an attorney, and probably family-wise as well, is dealing with the injured party and their caregivers, because you're never just dealing with that individual, especially in the law end of it, and doctors as well. You've got to have a caregiver that brings them to their doctor's appointments, brings them to their legal appointments.
How difficult is it to prove a brain injury?
So, again, as we let off, technology is getting better and better. But even with increased technology, there's still always questions. And when we're representing an injured individual, and I've got the ability to map out an injury inside of a vehicle or something hitting my client in the head, to an MRI that shows deficits in a certain area, and then we can track it even further through medical testimony, that's easy. But it doesn't always work that way. A lot of times it doesn't work that way, and you can't see objective findings.
So both of my parents suffered both traumatic brain injuries. Their personalities have never been the same. I was 12 years old when this happened. They're still able to function. I would say, I don't know if I would say normally, but they're definitely different. But they suffered some horrific injuries. The person that hit us did not have any money. Simple as that. Had a horrible insurance policy. My parents' medical bills were over $500,000 each. And like I said, it dramatically changed their lives forever. So if somebody comes up to you, and we rewind back 25 years, and the person that hits you in a car accident has literally no money, where does the money come from? Where can it come from if they have a horrible insurance policy? You can't get anything, right?
Yeah, you can't get anything. That's 100% correct. That's why we have the ability, when you're buying your own auto coverage, to get underinsured coverage or uninsured coverage, so that you can try and get those things down to protect yourself. But other than that, yeah, absolutely. You're looking at your health insurance to get you medical treatment and not a penny in your pocket afterwards.
And it's just the luck of the draw. You got to hope. Unfortunately, you never hope that you're in a car accident or something around that nature. But if it does happen, you hope that the person that is liable has money. Yeah, go ahead, Christy.
We talked about the technology, Steve. Is there also a shift in awareness, you think, nowadays, given, there is more education out there for people, whether they're athletes, whether they're just everyday Americans, where, they're not so quick to not want to be out there as far as what their injuries are, right? Back in the day, for example, athletes were like, I want to tough this out, or I don't want to deal with any liability for anybody else. This is just something I chose to do as an athlete, and I'll live with the consequences. That's not really the case now, is it, these days? Nowadays, people are more proactive, and they're willing to go and, and pursue what is rightfully due theirs when it comes to these types of injuries and possible liability.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The NFL took a big step finally in admitting that there may, or I don't know really what they admitted, to be honest with you, but there may be an issue, and we need to study it, and we're going to set aside funds. And whether you follow football or not, it's hard to miss how that's gone through our society. So people, they might not be specifically aware of what a brain injury is or what causes it, but certainly they're aware of the term. Hey, there is a brain injury. There is such a thing.
Right.
And doctors can now study it and identify it. And if you've got it, maybe somebody should have to pay for it.
Based on your experience, I'm asking this to you personally, Steve. After the Junior Seau situation and the Kansas City Chiefs player who murdered people in the parking lot or who shot himself in the parking lot, how prevalent do you think that CTE is as an issue, and is it big enough that it could actually affect the game of football long term?
So here's my limited exposure with the CTE and the NFL, and it is limited. I don't think that there are yet enough studies that can separate a good control between these players that played football and had complaints, and we're now able to study them, and people that haven't played football and have complaints, or the normal brain and have complaints with no history of any trauma. So I think it's fantastic that we're able to track more and more, that medicine has enabled us to see more and more, but I think there's still a lot that needs to be determined and a lot of new technology that needs to be invented so that we can really track people, for instance, while they're alive.
Sure.
And now all the CTE tests are from people that have already passed on, and now we open them up and we take a look. Oh, look here, there's a problem.
I like to reference movies. We just had Rob Van Dam in, and I asked him about the movie The Wrestler, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. I want to ask you about the Will Smith movie, Concussion. I thought it was a really good movie, and we're told, listen, it's a movie, right? So not everything is going to be factual and true. But I would imagine you watched that movie. What did you make of that movie, and do you really think that doctor really changed the course of history?
I think he definitely put us in a awareness. He put all of us in an awareness. I don't know if history's changed yet. I guess if I was playing in the NFL or you were interviewing an NFL player, they would say yes. I mean, look, when we watch the games, there's now concussion protocol. 5-6 years ago, that didn't exist. Somebody gets hit, they're out. Their helmet comes off, they're out. They sit for multiple days. So certainly the awareness is there. I don't know if I'd go on to it's changing quote-unquote history, but I can tell you as a trial lawyer, it is a lot easier, or at least I feel more comfortable walking into a jury now with a brain injury case. The defense is always going to say there is no brain injury.
Sure. PTSD, we've been talking about that a little bit. We had a former Democratic presidential candidate in studio here a few weeks ago, Seth Moulton, who is a war hero, right? He's been on the front lines, and he said that he's with so many, not so many, but he's had friends that have committed suicide because of PTSD. Talk to me a little bit about that. There's a lot of people that suffer from PTSD, I would imagine, for many different reasons. But I'm talking about people that have served in our military, that have seen some horrific things that are never the same for the rest of their lives. Can you give me some specific examples of maybe some of the clients that you've had that have suffered from PTSD? And I would imagine, like I said, it's very different circumstances for the reasons why they have it.
Yeah, certainly. So I had a client in my past that, although she was physically and mentally able to, for the most part, care for herself, meaning get up, get herself dressed, get to the store, get herself food. As soon as she got more than a few feet away from her home and her comfort, she would absolutely shut down.
Wow.
So she ended up moving from Las Vegas and moving to Chicago, in a city where, without doubt, in her building, she could get food, she could shop, she could do her banking, she could do her laundry, she could centralize her entire world in one building. because of the stresses that came upon her whenever a trigger hit her and she was walking out, driving, what have you. I've got another client I've got many, many clients, and anybody that does plaintiff personal injury work, and especially trial work, your clients become afraid to drive.
Wow.
I mean, just plain and simple.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, when I got into that accident I was just telling you about with my family, I didn't want to get into a car for like years. It was really bad. So I know exactly what you're saying there.
When you say shut down, do you mean like have a panic attack, have an anxiety attack? Like what takes place when someone shuts down?
Well, it hasn't happened to me, thankfully, but I think everybody is different. But my experiences have been that clients will absolutely shut down. So when that stress level hits you, you now have no ability to control any aspect of your functions. So
Wow.
I have another client that after her injury, she decided, you know what, I'm tough, I'm physically able, I'm going to give it a shot. We're now 4 months after her accident. She goes to get in the car to drive to the grocery store, for which she's driven to 1,000 times.
Wow.
And she gets around the block and shuts down.
And that's just the mental side of things. So if you get hit and you have a bunch of actual bills and you can't pay those bills, imagine that compounded with the financial side of things.
Of course.
It's unbelievable. If you're just joining us, by the way, attorney Steve Lewis, he is with the Van Law Firm. Of course, Sandy Van, a personal friend of mine who has done a great job, fantastic law firm, and they handled my case unbelievable. And we have Steve Lewis, of course, in studio, who deals with these types of brain injuries. This is what he does for a living.
So, Steve, to piggyback off of what JD brought up earlier regarding, the Kansas City Chiefs player who shot himself, of course, the Junior Seau thing we all know about, that's another aspect, right, of what you have to sometimes deal with. Obviously, you deal with plaintiffs that are still with us and still alive that'll have legal action against the NFL or major sports leagues or whatever. But do you also deal with issues like family estates, right, where you have for example, an NFL player that has a large estate or some type of financial situation that's not been squared away because of the untimely passing or something that goes on along that lines? Do you have issues that you deal with in that area as well too?
Yes, certainly. When we're dealing with wrongful death cases, traumatic brain injury cases, we'll have clients that are legally unable to take care of themselves physically, but also financially.
Right.
And we've got guardianship courts that are set up. So if you as the attorney or the treating doctor say, hey, he or she can't take care of herself or himself physically or financially, we have guardians appointed.
So 21-year career, Steve, what's the most money you were able to get for a client in a case?
The largest settlement that I've had thus far for one individual was $30 million.
Holy smokes. Wow, that's a lot of money. And now listen, I'm sure you've the opposite end of it where we just talked about it, where somebody suffers a brain injury and they're never the same for the rest of their lives, but there's no money. You can't get anything. There's no insurance money. The person who's liable for the injury has no money. There's nothing you can do. That's got to be a really difficult part of your job. And as great as it is to be able to take care of a client financially for the rest of their life, you just mentioned $30 million. It's got to also be very difficult to have to explain to a client, listen, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah,
right?
It is. It's one of the hardest parts, if not the hardest part of our job, representing injured individuals. I can't tell you how many times I've had family in my office and they lost a loved one. And they had little to no coverage, and the gentleman or lady that hit them had little to no coverage. And you need to explain to them that financially there is no money that exists to right this wrong, and it's very, very hard.
Yeah,
it's very hard, and there's no solution to it.
And there's no government programs or government aid instituted to help a situation like that?
So depending on the scenarios, there can be. So if a crime was committed as part of the injury, then there are various avenues through our criminal system that can not only punish the individual for causing that injury, but also seek restitution.
Wow.
There are victims of crime groups that will help you get through and into various treatment. And luckily that there are some amazing doctors and facilities that are happy to give their time to try and help out individuals that wouldn't otherwise be able to help themselves.
So I want you to give out the information if somebody obviously is looking to hire an attorney in this. You obviously specialize in these types of brain injuries. So how do people get in touch with you, and how does this process work for people that are considering hiring an attorney like yourself?
Yeah, so the easiest thing is to call the law firm. The Van Law Firm is 702-529-1011. Obviously, if you have a brain injury situation, whether it's a family member, friend, or you think that you yourself, because obviously you can suffer a brain injury and still function. I mean, the NFL is a prime example. We've talked about it. These guys are functioning every day. My email, shoot me an email. It's Steve, S-T-E-V-E, at vanlawfirm.com. Pretty easy.
So can I sue my parents for coddling me as a child? And I'm extremely messy because my parents did everything for me growing up, and they coddled me. I don't know if I have a brain injury, but I think I don't know. What would you call that? What's the word I'm looking for? I guess they just
spoiled.
They spoiled me as a child. So can I hire you as an attorney to sue my family? Can I do that?
I think there'd be a lot of generations of parents that are recently bankrupt if you could.
You're probably right about that. Well, listen, Steve, this is really fascinating work that you're doing, and you obviously you're very good at it. So I appreciate you shedding some light on this issue. This is an ongoing saga that is going to continue, sadly. But thank God, there's people like you out there to help your clients in these types of situations. Thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
There you go.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Steve.
Steve Lewis from the Van Law Firm, and we'll be joined, I believe, by Sandy next week. But Steve, we'd love to have you on again sometime. This is really really educational too for a lot of us that don't know a lot about this stuff. So thank you again. We really
thank you,
appreciate
Steve.
it.
Absolutely.
All right, there you go, Steve Lewis, attorney Steve Lewis, joining us. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to the Vegas Take right here on the all new 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDAWN.